Hey everybody, this is Ian and I'm going to be building a user profile setup for YelpCamp. This is one that a lot of students have been asking for, so I figured I'd go ahead and throw something together for you all. So I haven't done this, at least not for YelpCamp anyway, so I'm just going to go ahead and do it from the hip, kind of like my last video with the admin roles, and we'll see where we go with it. So the first thing we want to do is go look at our code. So I have everything open here in Sublime Text. I had some files already open, I'll close those. And let's take a look at our user model. So right now we have this isAdmin, we have username, we have password. So what's some other stuff that we could put into our user? Typically a user will have like an avatar. So we'll do an avatar. That'll be a string. So we'll do avatar string. And we could have a default string that it goes to if the person doesn't enter an avatar, but I'm not going to add that right now for simplicity's sake. So username, password, avatar. We could do first and last name if we wanted to. So first name string, last name string, and if we want, we can put the person's email in here as a string. Okay, so that's quite a bit of stuff for now. We'll just put that there, save the file, and in our views for registering a user, we need to give some inputs for this. So I have username and password here. I'll go ahead and copy the one for username, and right here I will do one for first name and then last name and then email. And so for that last one for email, we can change it to type equals email, name is equal to email, and then placeholder is just going to be like john@doe.com for an example of what we're expecting from the user. Okay, so what did I say this one was? This is going to be last name, so we'll do last name, and then the one above it is first name, and we can put first name here and last name here. And you can go with, like, in the placeholders we're telling the user what we expect for them to put in there. We don't even have any labels, which is kind of bad practice, but again, for the sake of simplicity, I'm not going to add labels now. I'll do that in a different separate tutorial. But to follow this format, instead of putting this John Doe, I'll just go ahead and put email. Okay, so let's save that, make sure we have everything. Oh, avatar, of course. So first name, last name, email, and then let's do, we'll paste this in, text, and we'll do avatar, and then we'll say avatar URL. So the avatar image URL. I will just do avatar URL. Okay, so now that's saved. I have my server running over here. Everything is good and accounted for, so I'm going to go ahead and go back here in the browser and refresh. This will look a little bit different from your C9 setup because I'm editing everything locally from localhost 3000, but virtually all the commands I'm entering into Sublime are going to be the same commands that you'll enter into C9 if that's what you're working from, and then you'll be previewing your application the same way that I'm previewing it here in the browser, so nothing to worry about there. So I try to add a new campground, must be signed in to do that. Go ahead and sign in with my existing user. Oh, not the campground, sorry. I log out and then I go to sign up, registration, here it is. Okay, so we can do username, password, first name, last name, email, avatar URL, admin code. And it's going to bug me if we leave that capitalized. So in the route for index is where we're going to have the post for register. So in the register, this form will post to /register. So we'll go back to routes, index.js, router.post, register. And here I've got the code for new user, and then if there's an admin code and it's equal to this, then set them to true for admin. So username is rec.body.username, and we'll go ahead and do comma, first name, first name, can't type today, rec.body. Actually, let's see here. If we have all this stuff as username, password, first name, last name, email, avatar, admin code, then I think what we could do here is, let me see, new user, and then we'll just pass in the rec.body object. And I'm going to introduce you to something pretty cool. It's called Locus. It's a debugging tool that will allow us to look at this new user before we actually enter that user into the database. So I don't want any of this code to run. I'm going to go ahead and comment it out. Right here I'm going to type eval require, and then the package name is Locus. This is a npm package name. So of course we have to have that installed. I think I have it installed already, but just so that you know the command, make this a little bit bigger. It's going to be npm I locus, or many of you probably know the I is install. I can't spell, but it's install. You can do I instead of install for short. So npm I locus, L-O-C-U-S, and it will install. Once it gets installed, then we can go ahead and close that out. I'll let that do its thing. So I'm going to save this file right here, go back here and refresh, and now as soon as I submit this, it's going to freeze up the code. As soon as it hits that line, as soon as it hits this line in the route, it's going to freeze it up and allow me to take a look at any variables that are available to me inside of the terminal. So we're going to have new user available to us, and that's what we're going to inspect here in a moment. So we go back here, this is done. I'm going to close this out. You can see my server still running. I'm running it with no daemon. No daemon just allows me to run my server continuously without having to restart it every time I make a change. I put a link to that in the description if you don't know about it already. Okay, so we're ready to go. We can do we'll just refresh it real quick. A username will be Ian2. Password is going to be something super secret that I won't tell you. And then first name is Ian, last name is Schoonover. Email is ian@ian.com. Avatar URL, let's go find something. So, oh, that's a pretty cool background. Let's see if we can get our hands on that. Probably, maybe, this little watermark's going to be on it. What is that? Okay, cool. So we can use this with the little watermark. That's fine. So avatar URL, we'll post that in. Admin code, we're not going to worry about that. That's from a previous tutorial, but we can just leave that blank. So I'll go to sign up, and now if I go to terminal, you can see that this is the line, the little arrow is the line where it hit eval require locus. Sorry if this is hard to see. This is just the way their user interface is. So it's on this line right here. Let's go ahead and type in new user. Alright, so you can see everything in here except for I didn't really want the password to be in there, and you can see that my password is password, but so I don't want that in there because I want to do the password with this user.register new user rec.body.password. So we're going to scrap that and we're going to build our own object here. So we'll do username rec.body.username, comma, first name rec.body.first name, and we'll go ahead and open up this object, make it a little bit easier to read. Okay, last name rec.body.last name, and avatar rec.body.avatar. Make sure we're not missing anything. So we have username, password, we don't want password, avatar, first name, last name, email. So username, first name, last name, email, rec.body.email, comma. Okay, so now, go ahead and put that back there. save this. We say create the new user, and then add the isAdmin if the person typed in the correct code. That's from my other tutorial. And then register the new user and pass in the rec.by.password. Okay, so if everything's working here, then we should get a new user. Let's go make sure that this is restarted, and it has. We'll refresh the page. Make sure that we don't have any users in here, so db.users.find. Nothing. Great. Okay, so we go here. We can say username is Ian, password is password, and then the email, ian@ian.com, and then the avatar, and we'll paste that in, and we will sign up. So it says, nice to meet you, Ian. Okay, great. So now if I go refresh this and do a find, I have this salt, which is this huge alphanumeric string, and then somewhere in here there should be a hash. Yep, so here's the hash, which is much bigger than the salt. Then the username, first name, last name, email, avatar, and then isAdmin is defaulted to false. So at this point, we have information about the user on the user model, and if we want to create a profile, then we can do that. So the question is, do we want this to be a public profile that other users can see, or do we just want this to be a profile for you to be able to see as a user? And we could even do both. So let's go ahead and make user profiles. So like if a user creates a campground and we click more info, and you see that submitted by Ian, other users could potentially click on that and it would open up Ian's user profile. And don't worry about this error here, that's for Google Maps. I don't have any of that connected right now. Okay, so let's make a public profile. So we'll go ahead and do it inside of index.js, since we already have the registration stuff inside of here for our routes. So with this file open, let's create a new route at the bottom of all these. And if you want, you can put a comment here or something like, users profile or user profiles, however you want it. Okay, so we'll do a router.get, and then we will do slash, and let's do something like, if we wanted it to be RESTful, technically we would do /user/ID. A lot of websites will have kind of like prettier URLs, so it'll have something like /profile, but let's just go ahead and stick with how we've been doing it, and we'll do /users/ID. Okay, so that's going to have a function with a request and a response, and go ahead and close out the semicolon. And now what we want to do is find this user in question and render information about them in a view. So we'll do a user dot, and let's make sure we have access to user. Up here we do, because we had to use the user model to register and log in the user. So we'll do user dot find by ID, and we'll pass in rec.params.id. So because we have the ID here, whenever someone sends a GET request to this URL with an actual ID in place of :ID, then we can access that ID via the request object, params object, and the ID property. So when we get that, we'll do a function, check for an error, and pass back we'll just call it the found user. And so now we'll do a quick little error checking. If error, let's just say rec.flash error, comma, and then something like, I think this actually has to be a string. So error, and we'll do it as something went wrong. So not super descriptive, but it's fine. So we'll do a res.redirect, and we'll just redirect back to the root, whatever the home page is. So if that doesn't happen, then the next thing we can do is do a res.render, and we'll render users / and we'll just call it I guess a show page. I'm sorry, that leading / should not be there. Make sure you don't have that. So we're going to go into views, users, show, and that will be the user's profile. And then we need to pass in an object with local variables, so we'll pass in the user object and pass in found user. Okay, cool. So we'll save this, and now we need a view for this to actually be able to access. So close routes, go to views. We don't have a directory called users, so we'll create one now. Now we have this users directory, create a new file, call it show.ejs, save it. Let's take a look at some of the other show pages. They have this, we'll just copy the whole thing, I'm not going to use all of it, but I pasted it in here, and all I really wanted, I'm going to get rid of all this stuff, was this right here, the include partials header and footer. So before we do anything, we'll just put an H1 in here and say user profile. So this will let us know that it's working. And the question is, okay, how are we going to link to user profiles? So like I said before, in the campground show page, there's a link to whoever created it. So I think we have submitted by and then campground.author.username. So let's go ahead and wrap that in an anchor tag, and we will do, let's see here, campground.author. So I'm just going to copy this and use it. I'll close that, wrap this with the closing anchor tag, and inside of here I'm going to go to slash users slash, and I'll put in campground.author.id and close that just like that. So it's going to go to slash users and then the author of the campground's ID. That'll get us to the user profile. So if everything's working as expected, we can refresh here, go to more info. This name is now a link. So if I click on Ian, user profile, perfect. So now what we want to do is actually display some information about the user, right? So we'll go back to the show page for users, and let's go ahead and use our bootstrap classes to make it look kind of nice. So we'll do a row, and then inside the row we'll have like a column. We'll do a medium column with 4, and then I think we can do, well, let's just do that, and then we'll do another medium column with 8. That makes 12. So here we will have an image, and the source will be user dot, and then what did we call it? Avatar. Okay, and then for alt text we'll just call this user profile image, and so that'll give us an image. Right above the image we'll do like an H1, and we'll say EJS clown hat tag and user dot we could do the username, or we could do the first name and the last name. So let's do user dot first name, and then I think we can concatenate this as a string inside of here and do a user dot last name, and that'll give us the full name for the user. So let's just save this temporarily and go see. Alright, so we have a problem here. It doesn't like first name of null, so it doesn't recognize user. If we go back to, let's close out the views, go to our routes, index. Okay, user should have been found user, user.find by ID, rec.params.id, render users show. Alright, so first thing we can do is just comment this out and do a user just to see if that object returns anything, and it doesn't, so that's a problem. So we have this user ID up here, but we did not find a user, which is bad news. Okay, so we'll leave this in here, and we'll go back to our index.js, and again we will use eval require locus. Okay, and so if we go to the user page, we refresh, it's going to freeze. We go back to no daemon, and if I look at found user, it's null. But if we look at rec.params.id, we get this one that ends in E2FC. Let's go double check our users over here. So we have one user. Okay, so here's the problem. the Ian that created that campground no longer exists in the database. So in order to remedy that, we'll go ahead and go back here and exit this. It's going to run that error, no problem. Let's go back to YelpCamp and create a new campground real quick. So I actually like that picture. I'm going to copy the image address and add a new campground. So we'll log in as Ian, add a new campground. We'll say Badlands, image URL, it's free. This is in South Dakota, and then we'll say Badlands National Park. Okay, submit it. Alright, cool. So the second one is the new one. We'll click on it. It's submitted by Ian. So if we click on this, I think we still have eval require locus in there. We do. Let's go ahead and get rid of it. Save this. This is going to restart. Now let's refresh this page. And here is my name, first and last, and my profile picture. So there's plenty of stuff you could do to, capitalize the first letter of the name and then lowercase the rest of it. I'm not going to worry about that for now. There's really not a whole lot more information we could put in here unless you added more information as part of the sign up process. We could put links to all the campgrounds that I've created. So let's go ahead and do that, and then let's put some dummy text. So inside of users show.ejs, we'll open up this div and we'll do some libsym text. And if you're wondering how I just did that, I just typed libsym and hit tab. That's part of Emmet, E-M-M-E-T. You can go to emmet.io and add that to your Sublime text. So, I think Emmet's probably available for a lot of other text editors as well. So, if I refresh, alright, something wacky is going on here. So, the image is bleeding over. Let's go ahead and put it inside of a thumbnail class. So, we'll do something like, how are we going to do this? Let's do a div thumbnail. We'll bring this out and close that. And that puts the whole thing inside of a thumbnail. And then, I don't know if we can maybe put the H1 above it. Let's see how that looks. Okay, so that looks a little bit better. I think right below it we could put a caption. So we'll do caption. And then we can say something like, let's go ahead and put my email down here. So we'll say user.email. And emails are usually linked to, so let's put an href equals mail to, and then we actually need to copy the email again. So we'll paste it in there, close that, and close the anchor tag here. There we go. Alright, cool. So we have our little thumbnail here. Now everything is proportional. I don't really like that there's all this space right here and then the text is up top. So we could fool around with the CSS to fix that. I don't know. I don't really want to mess with it right now. So what could we do? Oh, the post. So we'll put the post above this description text here. Or what we can do is we can take the description text, we can put it over here so it's beneath this, and then we'll put all the posts right here. Alright, so the user isn't going to have any posts if we do really there's no way to find posts by this user unless we do it in the route, because the user model knows nothing about posts, unfortunately, but the campground model does know something about author. So let's see if we can't find all of the posts created by, all the campgrounds rather, that were created by this author. So in index.ejs we'll do a campground, and we don't have access to campground here, so we actually need to create that variable. So we'll do campground is equal to the campground. Yep. And down here we can do campground.find all.where and then I think it's like author.id equals found user dot id dot exec function error, and we'll just call these campgrounds. So we need to move this up. Of course, there's an error. No problem. We'll just copy this error here, and now we can actually pass in campgrounds as campgrounds. And if I haven't made any typos, then we can go to here and we can do a campgrounds.forEach function campground, and we'll open this up. So we'll close that, go down here, close that. Oop. And now we can do a campground dot what is the campground title? Name. So we could do campground name and maybe like an image or something. So campground.name, and we can link to it if we want to. So let's see here, anchor tag href equals / campgrounds / and then we'll do a campground.id, or we can just do an ID. So if you don't know, using a .id is what's called a getter method, and it just pulls the _ID from the document and returns it as a string. So it's useful for things like, you know, using a string inside of a string. Okay, so we have that. Close that anchor tag, and these are all going to be side by side. So let's go ahead and put them in a list, an unordered list. So we'll take that and we'll wrap each one of these in a list item. Okay. Alright, so for now it's just going to be all the names of the campgrounds that I've created. Something seems to have broken. Campground is not defined. Okay, no problem. So we go to index.camp. Simple typo there. Refresh. Cool. So there's one up here and it says Badlands, and I kind of want these to look similar, so let's go ahead and put show at the top of this. Let's put let's put like an H3 and say EJS tags user.username, and then we'll do 'S, so the username's campgrounds, and we could put a colon if we wanted. Cool. So Ian's campgrounds, there's Badlands. If we click on it, it takes us to Badlands. Of course, this one's made by Ian, so I can click on it and it takes me back to Ian's profile. So there's a lot more features that you could add to this. Basically, you could add like a password reset feature for the user that's logged in. Like if the user that's logged in matches the user whose profile they're on, aka their own profile, then they're able to press a link and reset their password. So that's a whole nother lecture that we're not going to do right now. But just to review, this is how we add user profiles to YelpCamp. This is one way of doing it. So in the URL, we go to /users /user ID, and we have, let's see here, in the model, we added some new string fields here, some new properties, and then we put those inside of register.ejs as fields. Let's see, what else do we have? Once that submits to the route, so index.js goes to the post route, we build the new user object from the user model, and then we check if the user's an admin, if they typed in the correct password, and if they are, then we make them an admin, and then we register a new user with the password. Remember, we don't want to do it the way I was trying to do it before, because then we're saving the password as plain text into the database, which is a big issue. So we pass in as the second argument here. It doesn't get saved in the database, it just gets salted and hashed, which is Passport's way. Well, it's just the way that you encrypt a password. when you're doing user authentication. So then we check for errors and register the user. And then down here we have this route, router.get user's ID. We find the user. If there's no error, then we find the campgrounds that the user created with this little find where equals exec method chaining here. And once we find all those campgrounds inside of this callback that's inside of that callback, we do a res.render. So we render the view show for users, we pass in the user that we found, and then the campgrounds that belong to that user. At which point, over here, we can render all this information. So once you get to this point, your options are kind of limitless. You can do whatever you want here, style it however you want. So if you end up making something cool from this, go ahead and share it in the comments. I'd love to see that. All right, cool. If you have any questions, ask them in the comments, and we'll see you next time.